25 Creepy Urban Exploration Stories. According to Reddit. Number 25. This happened 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. My Urbex friends and I were on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area when we discovered a really creepy cave. An old abandoned cement mine, we later learned. We did some mild exploring that day, but quickly realized it would require more gear to thoroughly explore, flashlights, respirators, etc. About a week later, 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered there was basically one main shaft that sloped downward and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down and was pretty well graded, so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery and rusting equipment off of this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning. We were trying not to get lost or confused. Along the way, the walls were littered with the classic abandoned graffiti. X was here, swastikas, initials and dates, phallic drawings, etc. As we got deeper and deeper, though, the graffiti really thinned out. At this point, the light from the entrance was long gone, and we were relying solely on our flashlights. The air was so stagnant and hazy with particles that the light from our flimsy flashlights would only go 20 feet or so before getting totally obscured by dust. Thank goodness for the respirators. The glow sticks we had brought to mark our way to prevent getting lost were also basically useless because they were disappearing in the haze a few steps after dropping them, and we had only brought about 10 or so. At this point, we started arguing amongst ourselves. Several of the crew were nervous about going any deeper with the air quality being so terrible and without a good way to prevent us from getting lost. We were probably a quarter mile into the earth now. The rest of us managed to override that sentiment of fear by assuring them that the path was easy and straightforward, so we'd have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our level-headedness, sense of direction, and flashlight battery life to get out. Despite the agreement to push on, it was becoming very creepy for everyone. We walked for a while in silence, hearing nothing but our own movements and steady drip of water coming from somewhere deep in the cave. I think we were all pretty scared at this point, but no longer willing to admit it to each other. Then, we stumbled across something that all made us stop. Dug into the side of the deep stone shaft we were slowly descending was a tunnel, an offshoot. It was narrow, you'd have to crouch to get through it, and it was also a good few feet off of the ground, so it required a scramble to reach it. But that wasn't what made us stop. It was the graffiti. We hadn't seen any for 10 minutes or so, and had assumed that the artists never came this deep. But somehow, someone else clearly had, and the message they left was ominous. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all of them somehow relating to death and destruction. Scrawled throughout the tunnel were words like suffering, pain, plague, disease, and hell. It was pretty terrifying. Who else would come this far just to write such terrible messages in a mysterious tunnel that broke off from the main path? But there was no turning back now. We had to see where the tunnel led to. Despite our fear, we were overpowered by intense curiosity. So one by one, We crawled through the tunnel to the other side. What we found was a strange, flooded chamber. Around the pool of water were many large stones, each covered with dozens of burned out candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in the place. The walls had a few creepy monster faces poorly graffitied on them, and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was ringed with a spray-painted, blood-stained mouth. What was this place? Some weird ritual location for Satan worshippers, an elaborate hoax set up by a bunch of kids? We couldn't find much evidence to figure it all out, and we were running out of adrenaline to keep exploring. We all crawled out of that weird hellhole and back into the main shaft, where we promptly headed towards the exit. When we finally saw the pinprick of natural light coming from the real world outside, we were flooded with relief. We never did figure out what that mysterious cavern was for, and I think I'm content to leave it a mystery. No, we didn't hear any monsters in the depths of the tunnel or find any bloody Satan praisers themselves, but finding that room buried deep in the old forgotten mine was enough to creep all of us out for a long time. Here's some photo evidence of the adventure. Huh. Number 24. Not Urbex, Rurex, I suppose you could call it. I was working on a projector for a photography project, and there was a massive forest up a mountain near where I live. Said forest contains an abandoned hospital that was shut down after an unexplained death. No, I'm not joking. Attached is a news article. Woman's death in Cork Hospital in 2006. Still not published. What a scary world. So it's a shitty day weather-wise. I'm in a woods with a camera and a packed lunch, ready to go wandering. After a few hours, I found a small camp with some abandoned tools, including a massive bolt cutter. Someone had tried to destroy them in a fire, but that was a no-go. Maybe 200 to 300 meters away, I found a burned-out car. Not an uncommon sight in the area. Kids buy super shitty clapped-out bangers and trash them up out here. Not far away, about running distance, I found a pair of women's jeans. And a little bit further away from that, maybe 5 meters or so, there was a pair of panties hanging off a low branch. They'd clearly been there for a while. I'm not sure how long underwear would last exposed to Irish weather, and these were right out in the open. But a few weeks maybe? Pretty creepy finding all of that, all alone in the woods. I flipped through the local news for anything on any break-ins or assaults or anything suspicious, and couldn't find anything that had happened recently. Well, there you go. Number 23. This is not me, but someone explores mines for a YouTube video called Exploring Abandoned Mines and Unusual Places. In one of his videos, this one, you can hear human voices whispering. Okay. It doesn't feel like it's fake, because normally I don't get any chills from all these fake horror videos on YouTube, but as soon as these voices start, I get really terrified and uncomfortable. The voices happen at about 12:10. Well, we'll check that out later. Number 22. There is an abandoned East Coast insane asylum that I've often seen posted, both on Reddit as well as various other places around the internet. I personally have been there probably 10 or 15 times over the course of a decade, and each time I've found something new, as the complex itself is very spread out and very massive. What I've never seen posted or even mentioned, however, is the maze of tunnels beneath the complex. Connecting each building is a subterranean network of tunnels for steam, water, sewage, and electric. The tunnels are roughly 10 to 15 feet underground and quite long. They lead into the basement of each structure and a portion of the complex with an emergency escape hatch that leads out into the woods between buildings in a portion. One weird thing is that most of the entrances to the tunnel system are hidden in the walls. I exited through a door once and found myself in a room that was the complex's post office, where I'd literally been 5 times before and had never noticed that there was any hidden passage integrated into the wood paneling. The complex has been abandoned for 20 to 30 years, so parts of the tunnel are very wet with leaking water. When you're down in them, you constantly hear environmental noise as well as echoes from your own movements. There is nothing reflective down there, and there are no outside sources of light. If you don't have a bright enough flashlight, it can get kind of difficult to make out features of the things in the distance, and you're relying a lot upon the slight tonal differences of what you can see to determine what something is off in the distance before you're right up on it. Go out on a moonless night and shine an LED pen light across a concrete wall for like 15 feet away to get an idea of what I'm talking about. Here's the story. First of all, I have a stupid habit of going into places like this by myself. I've recently started correcting this because you never know when an accident can happen, leaving you alone, underground, and in the dark. The last time I was in the tunnel, I was by myself with a single AA battery powering a 75 to 100 lumen LED flashlight. Mistake number 2. During this excursion, I decided to follow the tunnel to what was the water treatment building for the complex. This tunnel slopes downward, so the leaking water previously mentioned runs down and collects at the end of the tunnel. So, at the end of the tunnel, I enter this large room with 15-foot tall water storage tanks, where it probably is an inch of water and muck on the floor, which makes a stuck noise when you walk. I'm standing still, looking around with my flashlight, and from the opposite side of the room, around 20 feet away, I hear stuck, stuck. There is someone else in this underground room with me. I shine my flashlight across the room and don't see anything, but keep hearing the wet footsteps. All of a sudden, I shine the light on this human-shaped object that is just black. There is no difference in shading or anything. It's just like a shadow against the peach-colored wall, and I stammer out a hello. And all of a sudden, I can see this person's 2 eyes flash up, reflecting back my flashlight. But that's it. I don't know if the person was in a ghillie suit or what, but it's impossible to make out anything distinguishing. I don't know what kind of weirdo sets out in full black getup to rummage around underground, so at this point, I flip out. I spin 180 degrees on my heels and I bolt. I'm flying up the incline tunnel, slipping and sliding all over the place on the damp concrete. I fell a handful of times, sprained my wrist, and got a number of cuts on my knee. That run through the underground tunnel felt like an eternity. If you've ever seen the subway scene, nigga, what? If you've ever seen the subway scene from the movie 28 Weeks Later, that's the closest I can approximate it to. It was the closest thing I've ever experienced to a living nightmare. I've never been so terrified in my life. Looking back, I'm sure whomever I met down there in the dark probably was as terrified as I was, unless they were crazy as hell. I have no reason to believe they followed me, and they probably ran back the way they came, same as I did. I noticed that they didn't have a flashlight on. So what I think probably happened is that they noticed my light, pulled a hoodie up over their head, turned their lights off, and tried to hide as best as they could. Sorry if this got a little long and rambly. Just wanted to share my part here. If there's a takeaway from this, it can be summed up on a single fantastic sentence. Don't enter the strange underground tunnels through hidden doors. Or don't enter strange underground tunnels through hidden doors beneath long abandoned and forgotten insane asylums with a single tiny flashlight when you're by your lonesome. Or you could just stop it right there. Don't enter strange underground tunnels. Number 21. Went to an abandoned hospital. See, this is where you fucked up right here. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof on the outside of the buildings, locked steel door and the bottom. So the only way up was to climb on the outside up the first landing. My buddy boosts me up, I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I call down, we're definitely not alone here, dude. No, but it's cool, says a voice behind me, scaring the shit out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there. Coming down the stairs from above, hands up and palms out. Didn't mean to scare you. He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step on the handle of the steak knife, lean over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer the homeless guy a beer, which he gratefully accepts. And we shoot the shit on the landing for a while. We're talking about the city, cops, traveling, life in general. He's basically a drifter, been in town for a week or so, but a nice guy. Things are going pretty well, and he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I fucking hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens, and you never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. He's definitely not joking, and there's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy is fucking crazy. Yeah, man, I say. We're human. We just wanted to check out this place and drink some beer. You're gonna go ahead and move on now. We are gonna go ahead and move on now. We definitely don't want any trouble. He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer, carefully back up to the railing, jump down, and walk away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders the entire time, and he's just standing there, still, silent, watching us leave. That place is still abandoned 5 years later, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways you can't see coming. Jesus Christ. Number 20. I've got a few crazy, scary, but not creepy stories. We were exploring an old power plant. I was going to the control room while my friend continued down the hall. Suddenly, a part of the building collapsed. I immediately assumed something happened to my friend. Man, was I glad when I saw he was unharmed. The collapsed part of the building Well, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I don't know what I'm looking at. While exploring an abandoned steel factory, we went around the corner in the next hallway when we came face to face with what appeared to be a security guard creep. At first, my heart dropped until I saw it was only a dummy. Okay. Number 19. Me and a few friends decided to explore this abandoned child's hospital we'd heard about, which was in a small village about an hour from us. We get there, and it's this huge plot of land, trees surrounding the whole place, and the building in the center, real creepy looking. We had to climb up a wall to get inside, as we couldn't get it on the ground floor and had to go through a window that was ajar. After climbing through, the place is a mess, rubble everywhere that looked completely desolate, as if no one else had been inside in years. Anyway, we basically went straight up to the roof and sat and had a few beers and went home. I decided to go back a few days later with my girlfriend to have a proper look around because I wanted to explore. We went into the building and immediately there was a different vibe, unlike the other night. We jumped over the broken staircase to get to the ground floor. This was next to a large heavy-duty wooden door with multiple bolts and chains over it, and found a trapdoor with a ladder underneath that led to a basement. I convinced my girlfriend to come with me, but she wouldn't explore the basement when we were there. Just stayed at the bottom of the ladder with the torch while I had a quick look around. That's when it got really scary. I walked past some machines into the small room, which was completely empty, the exception of a kicked over chair and a noose hanging from a pipe directly above the chair. I shit myself, not literally, and turned around to leave when on the wall there was red graffiti, not prepared to believe it was blood because there was a lot, saying "Don't come back." Needless to say, I haven't been back. My girlfriend told me after she felt like I was gone for about an hour, when I was only gone 5 to 10 minutes, and kept hearing whispers from the dark corridors, and trapdoor fell shut above her at one point for no apparent reason. Very scary place. Would love to go back with more people, but damn, that shit me up. Number 18. When I was in college, a few friends and I went to this local abandoned hotel. It was a swanky place back in the little 50s. What? It was a swanky place back in like the 50s, but had just been sitting around abandoned and fenced off ever since. We walked by and saw an open window on a second-story ledge and ended up finding an old wooden ladder nearby on the property. What is this, a video game? We went in and hung around and saw a bit of great graffiti. The whole place was trashed with actual garbage, as well as bits of building that were falling apart. We made it up the staircase to the 3rd floor, looking in each of the rooms. The area we were in used to be the housing for the staff of the hotel. The 3rd floor was covered in garbage from throughout the years. And we got to the last room on the 3rd floor and looked in to find a lit candle with no one else around. Realizing we were not alone, we booked it out of there, and once we were outside, looked up to see someone watching us from one of the windows. Now, we went to college in a city with a significant homeless problem and assumed we had just stumbled into someone's home, but shit freaked us out. They cemented up the place after another explorer fell down an open elevator shaft and broke his legs. And it has recently been renovated, and they are turning it into an apartment building. Not the creepiest find, but definitely freaked us out in the moment. Makes me wonder why people that are stupid and crazy enough to go urban exploring don't, get some kind of satellite attachment and try to live stream what they're doing so that we can get scenarios like this. You could be rich, Could probably end up dead too. Number 17. I haven't posted this before in another thread, but it wasn't exactly urban exploration. It was more like rural exploration. Anyway, hope you enjoy. I grew up in a very rural area in the deep south and spent most of my time riding my horse alone in the national forest and expansive private properties that bordered our house. Forgive me, I was reading ahead to see if I've read this in another list, and I have. But for the sake of this list, I might as well read it again. I grew up in a very rural area in the deep south and spent most of my time riding my horse along in the national forests and expansive private properties that bordered our house. There was an old abandoned house about 2 miles ride through the woods from me, and I often rode to it on my journey through the woods. Sometimes I tied up my horse outside, went in and explored the inside, but there was really nothing of interest. There was just trash and things like electric bills from the 80s. I think an old woman used to live there, based on some of the pictures that I found. Time went on and I went back to college. My horse went with me and I lived on a farm near the college. I no longer rode past the abandoned house. After graduating college, my horse and I moved back for a little while, and I decided to go back and explore it again. So I rode my horse the less than 2 miles through the deep woods, or about 2 miles, to get to this house, which itself was probably oh my god, from a couple of feet from a lonely gravel road that cuts through the forest. It's a very secluded and almost creepy area. The house is about 3 miles away from the paved road. Okay. I am less brave than I used to be, so when I entered the house, I felt out of place and slightly scared. But I used my cell phone light to explore the room anyway. A lot was just as I remembered, but right as I was about to leave, I found a calf skeleton in the corner of the entry room. I have no idea how this calf got shut inside a building. The doors were firmly shut when I approached it. Also, the screen door opened one way, while the actual door opened the other. So it was impossible for both of them to be open at once for some creature to accidentally wander in. Furthermore, the nearest cow pastures are a good bit away from the house. I left the abandoned house with the image in my head of some deviant cruelly trapping a calf in there for sick purposes. Here are some images. And yes, I remember this story. You guys get it. Number 16. I used to be really big into urban exploration when I was younger. After I got older, I hitchhiked across the USA multiple times and stayed on the road for a little over 3 years. One of the most memorable experiences, south of Omaha, me and 4 other hippies made a camp at night in a field of weeds next to a railroad track. We woke up in the morning around 6 a.m. and one of the guys was like, "You smell that? Smells like fucking kush." We all were like, sure, go back to sleep. But then another guy was like, "Holy shit, it does smell like kush." Annoyed, I get out of bed and grab my flashlight. I shine it around and notice all of the plants around us look sticky. Intrigued, I get closer and realize we camped in the middle of some guerrilla grow patch of Mary Jane. Sure enough, we all got up and started looking around and even found very well hidden water lines, barbed wire. We started to think about grabbing some and taking it with us, but then we heard a gunshot far off and we all froze. Immediately after, we heard dogs barking and the sound of someone moving through the field. We started to rationalize that it was just someone hunting, but then there was another gunshot and it was much closer than the first. Suffice to say, we grabbed our shit, ran down the tracks, half of us barely clothed. Intriguing. Number 15. I guess no one has any reason to believe me, but a few years back, a friend and I were snooping around some allotments on the outskirts of our village in the UK. It was about 11 p.m., so it was pretty dark. Not a completely pitch black dark, but dark to the point where if you were to look at a tree from 30 meters away, all you'd see was a silhouette, but up close, you could see enough to navigate by. The allotment was surrounded on the 3 sides by deep hedge rows, with trees and the fields beyond. I'm always super vigilant in these sorts of situations, so generally I'll stop regularly and just listen, just stand as still as possible and strain my ears for people approaching. My friend crouched down around 3 meters from me to see what sorts of plants were growing and was pulling at vegetable that was growing in the soil. Whilst I was listening, I began to hear a noise coming from the back corner of the allotments, maybe 20 to 30 meters away or so. The noise is really hard to describe. It was like a low-pitched sound that sounded vividly like someone rampantly speaking in tongues, but it was odd. It kinda seemed smaller than a human voice, but deeper, like an animal, but speaking in tongues. All different vowel and consonants rolling over. It's really hard to describe, but I can hear it vividly when I try to remember it. My friend and I had a system of hand signals, of course. He was focused on this plant, and I was utterly convinced that this was going to be one of those things you hear or see. But by the time you've got someone's attention, the sound has stopped, and no one believes you for the rest of your life. I didn't want to move, risking drawing attention to myself, so I stood stock still and made a short, sharp hiss-type sound with my tongue. My friend looked up, and I signaled in the direction of the noise. It carried on. My friend and I stood in silence, listening for about a minute, before it started to increase in volume. That was the point where we decided we'd done enough investigating, and it carried on as we left. As it's a few years ago now, my sane head just says it was some kind of animal, a fox or something, but I spend a lot of time at night away from built-up areas, and I've never heard a noise that I could ever morph into that. It was just this odd babble of what sounded like made-up words, but coming from a voice box that didn't sound human. At the same time, we had all sorts of theories. We knew it could have just been an animal, but there's also a lot of suspicious government installations out there. Talk of a lot of hidden tunnel networks if you're out at night. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but my account above is true. Number 14. This isn't really a scary or horrifying story, but more of a dodged bullet story. Me, my best friend, and my cousin like to explore abandoned buildings and structures. At the time, we needed an abandoned location for a web series we were doing. We walked across a large barren field to get an old worn-down house. And there was even a small old barn right next to it. It seemed like the perfect location. We walked around the barn, and I was filming because I wanted to review the footage later to show other people involved in the series who couldn't make it. After we looked through a large portion of the barn, I stopped recording and we headed out. The next thing to explore was the house. However, there was something off about it. It certainly looked abandoned, but it didn't feel like it was abandoned. I noticed an orange extension cord and saw that it led to a small window near the ground. I could tell it was the basement and the light was on. I looked over at my friend and cousin and told them that I was pretty sure someone lived there. There was no garage and no car, but the light in the basement immediately told me that someone lived there. My cousin, for some reason, thought nothing of it and was going to try the door when, sure enough, a truck started coming down the driveway. So here we are, 3 teenagers standing right next to someone's house during the late afternoon with someone driving down the road. Me and my cousin immediately start to speed walk away from the house towards the barren field. The truck pulled up near us. A middle-aged Mexican man got out. He asked us what we were doing, and I said that we were walking through the field and were walking to a nearby neighborhood. He looked at us for a bit, and we started to back up and went inside. That immediately put an end to our exploration that day. The thing that makes this story one of the biggest dodge bullets is, what if my cousin broke into the house? What if I didn't notice the extension cable? Imagine all 3 of us in his house when he came home. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay? Number 13. There was an abandoned hotel I was checking out. Gained access through a blown-out window near the indoor pool. Smells like death inside. Come to find a couple of bloated dead deer in the slime collected towards the end of the pool. That should have been my sign to go. I make my way into the lobby and banquet area, come across a couple of raccoons and squirrels who scurry away swiftly. Everything is destroyed. Even the reception desks have been ripped in half. Nothing interesting to photograph, just trash. Neat little piles of trash. After a bit of searching, I find the stairwell. There's an odd noise coming from above that I brush off as rain. I decide to skip a couple of floors because they're probably in the same condition as the lobby, and a lot of the exterior windows have been blown out. I get to 4 and open the door, not worried about the noise as I am confident that I'm the only sober person on premises. Not worried about noise as I'm confident that I'm the only sober person on premise of not the only person. I am not going to sit here and try to figure out what that means. As I pull the door open, the rain noise suddenly ceases completely. I point my flashlight down the hallway and see hundreds of geese poke the heads out of the... What? I point my flashlight down the hallway and see hundreds of geese poke their heads out of the guest rooms. I remember the moment where nothing moved and we just stared at each other, as lasting several minutes. Though I'm sure it was about 10 seconds. Here I am, in the middle of the hall, geese of abandoned luxury start staring at me down. Once the initial shock of the sight wears off, I remember I'm only looking at half of the floor. Behind me, the geese aren't pulling a deer in headlights, they're coming towards me. Time to go. I close the stairwell behind me, only muffling the cacophony that erupted once I moved. As I hustled down the stairs, I realized the signs were there. Goose shit everywhere. I hit the lobby and turned towards the pool where a group of geese has collected as if they were trying to trap me. Luckily, they're just dumb birds. I go out and find the exterior of the hotel swarming with these fuckers. There was one lone sentinel standing on the roof, honking out a shrill command that the perimeter had been breached. I should have just stayed. I should have stayed to get more pictures, but I was done, covered in filth from a slip down the stairs, and didn't feel like collecting fresh shit from the dive bomber circling overhead. I did get this, though. Okay. 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 Number 12. Nothing big, but I was once exploring a drainage tunnel with friends. We were pretty deep inside of it. Turned a corner to see someone leaning against the wall with a hat on. It ended up being a sandbag, someone dressed up, but it scared the shit out of me because it was pretty deep in there. There were pants and shoes and a jacket with a hat on it. I don't know what they did to make the jeans look like legs, because I didn't touch it or go back. A friend of mine went back and told me it was a sandbag, and I was already done for the day. Okay, number 11. I had one creepy experience that I already told. But my friends who always go exploring told me about this time. They were just following a trail that went into the hills. And after almost reaching the freeway, they ended up near an old closed-up train tunnel. They were able to squeeze through some loose fencing, and after wandering through with nothing of interest, they eventually came to a bunch of shipping containers. They told me that when they glanced inside, they saw a ton of guns and ammo in one of them. Just a shit ton of heavy boxes in the rest. After a few minutes of checking it out, they heard voices from further down the tunnel, coming closer. So they got out of there. They also said it almost smelled like the ocean towards the end, so the tunnel might have led out near the beach. Hell no. Number 10. Calling that dude who went exploring down a bridge and found feces, a blood-soaked condom, and a chair, and pin-up posters on the wall. Yeah, we read that recently. I'm not doing it again. How much do I care? I mean, if you guys are subscribed to my channel, just go. Just go. Just go. Number 9. I drove a friend who was doing genealogy research on his family tree to an old cemetery that had individual family mausoleums, granite with bronze doors and stained glass windows for those who could afford them back in the day. It had been decades since his family mausoleum door had been unlocked and opened. So the caretaker had a hard time with the skeleton key trying to make the lock work. Finally, once we got inside, we discovered that a window on the back side along the cemetery property line, back to back with a garage, so you could easily see it, had broken, and vandals had entered through the rear. Sadly, they had pried open the sealed lids on several marble vaults and removed some of the remains, along with rings that had been entombed with the bodies at the time. Ooh. Sucks that people are so terrible that they steal from the dead. As rude as it is to sound, as rude as it is to say, I am totally of the line of thinking that, you know, they're dead. What do they need it for? But it still belongs to them. You know? If they didn't choose to leave it to somebody, then hey, let them bury themselves with all them things. Number 8. Last winter, I went into this abandoned parking lot under a closed shopping mall. It had 2 levels. The upper level had a bit of sunlight going in through the windows, but the lower levels was pitch black. I made my way down this wide ramp that the cars would use, and I decided to have a look at the bottom level. After turning my flashlight on, I noticed that the space was huge, much bigger than the upper level. I remember how the light danced through many of the supporting pillars and casted vivid shadows. I said, "Hello?" And I'm just looking around, just to make my intentions clear, but was met with no responses. So I decided to walk around for a bit, but couldn't see anything of interest, just a lot of junk. Some empty old bottles, but nothing that might indicate someone was living or hanging out around here. The place seemed completely abandoned. However, this uneasy feeling that someone might be hiding in the pitch black shadows of one of these pillars took the better of me, and I climbed back up the ramp. I left taking different routes and passed under an overhead clearing that the snow had fallen through. Just as I was about to hop the fence and leave, I noticed that the patch of snow that had formed had footprints in it. I know this doesn't really sound horrifying when you read it, as the logical explanation was that some poor chap had probably taken shelter from the cold inside the lot, but still, being there creeped the hell out of me. Number 7. I walked about 3 kilometers into a storm drain once, and all of a sudden we saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at us in the distance. Then it made a noise, which was distorted by the acoustics of the drain and made us freak the fuck out. It was like a horror movie. We were very deep in the drain and it was pitch black. We had no idea what it was and why it was down there. Anyway, I decided to approach it with caution. Classic. And it happened to be a small little white fluff ball, a cat. It was soaking wet, skinny, Probably hadn't eaten in days and was shivering. I wrapped it up in a jumper and exited via the manhole. The manhole opened onto someone's driveway directly opposite a local football match, and a handful of people in the audience noticed us, two random teenagers popping out of the manhole with a soggy cat. The facial expressions of the police officers were priceless, and we had to explain why we were trying to take a cat with us into a public transport. People are so silly. Oh boy. That's a wild cat. Number 6. I was exploring a certain abandoned mill near a large city on the coast with a friend. We snuck in, messed around a bit, and realized that we only had one flashlight. We took turns, weird noises, dark inside because there was no power, evidence of homeless occupation, and empty needles. Real horror game material. We come up the stairway and turn a corner. Ahead is a walkway bridge, aka the way to the rest of the building. To the right is pitch black room that doesn't feel very nice. As we walk towards the bridge, the flashlight picks out a sign that says to hell and points towards the dark room. We didn't go in. It didn't feel right. Man. Well, number 5. I was in an old hotel built into a city block in the style of the 1920s, with like storefronts, hotels, bar, rest, pools, and multi-levels, etc. It was a swanky place at one point. I used to sneak in and explore the rooms and floors. I was like 15, I think. So, anyways, I am on a date, and we'd had a few drinks, and I thought it would be cool to show her the hotel. It was next to a popular bar street in College Town, and many people knew of it since I dominated the skyline. Or it dominated the skyline. Jesus Christ, get me out of here. We're up on the highest floor where I'd never been before. I usually went to the 11th floor pool area because it was like being on an executive or an exclusive VIP area over the college bar street, but no one knew you were up there. It was my favorite spot for a discreet smoke after drinking or getting some Jimmy Johns and chilling. Jesus Christ, fucking shoot me. Give me 1 second. So anyways, we're up on the top floor, hoping to get out onto the smallish top roof. Imagine that's the kind of terraced mini skyscraper, and we hear this really, really unsettling noise coming from the room up ahead. It's dark and late, and we're way back into this fallen down hotel. The sound is like 1,000 hushed whispers, but it wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. There was a beating sensation to the whole thing that was so decentralized it was unnerving to the extreme. Every animal insect told me there was a huge doom-style boss monster or maybe full-scale rave was crammed down into one hotel room where all the rolling ravers are frantically telling each other, shh, shh. The girl is freaked out, but she's braver than me. She wants to go peek into the door. I want to bolt back to the fire escape and get the hell out, but I wasn't going to show her I was scared, so I follow her as we inch forward down into the hallway. When we reached the doorway, there was a half-working emergency light that cast just enough light into the hotel room. What I saw was a rolling mass of movement that kind of instantly triggered my gag reflex, and I jumped back as if someone had punched me in the stomach. The room was full, and I mean fucking full, of pigeons. A broken window let them in, and they made their perch there for the night. There must have been hundreds. The girl screamed. About the same time that I jumped and the pigeons took flight. About half of them out of the window and the other half into the hallway of the top floor with us. Wings and feathers and stinking birds hit me in the head and shoulders like wet Nerf footballs as we scrambled for the emergency exit and down the fire escape. I married that girl, and it turns out that was way more traumatic than the pigeon horror room story. But that's another story. Number 4. Went to an abandoned retirement home, assisted living facility. Turns out it became the home to a group of crazy homeless meth addicts. And one very angry raccoon. Oh, Rocket. They did not like trespassers. Number 3. My friends and I used to explore this old factory processing plant. No idea what it was originally. Anyway, it had lots of underground sections which were pitch black, even a couple of meters from the entrance, but which also required going down a flight of stairs. One time we found a burned out car 2 to 3 levels down. No idea how it got in there, but it was kinda creepy. Another time we found a hole. We didn't bring torches or flashlights with us because we're idiots. But we had lighters, and we're trying to figure out what the hole was or if it could lead anywhere. We put a stick in there, and it ended up being at least 6 feet deep. But we also learned that it was full of some liquid, and if we had fallen, it could have easily drowned. We could have easily drowned in the dark. Another time we went a couple of levels down, and one of us at the bottom started screaming shrieks of absolute terror, and the rest of us thought we were all going to get murdered. We all started running. Everyone was screaming at this point. And there was this sludgy shit on the ground, and some of us slipped and fell, just like in a goddamn horror movie, slipping and sliding, our limbs out of control. After, again, there's 6+ people screaming bloody fucking murder, and with absolute fear and terror on their faces. So all thought we were going to get murdered. Turned out a bird had made a nest down there, and my sister got spooked and my friend screamed like a bitch. Number 2. Exploring an abandoned construction site. It's a site out in redneck country that's got a bunch of old construction vehicles getting overgrown with plants, and my girlfriend and I declined to go check it out. See what it's all about. We look around and don't see a whole lot. It's about to rain, so we decide to head out. As we are getting in my car, my girlfriend freezes and says, "There's a guy in the woods watching us." I shit myself and ask if she's sure. She repeats herself and says he saw her see him and laid flat on the ground to hide himself. We noped the fuck out of there real quick. Number 1. I went to a closed mental hospital in my city with some friends at night. Everything was cool until we got to the basement, where there were 5-meter wide, 4-meter high lit tunnels going far to both directions. We headed down one and found a huge active generator. Then we went the other way And as we were about to hit another intersection, we saw two men wearing full green attire and face masks walking at the end of one of the corridors at 2 a.m. We got out of there real quick. Where, dude? Somebody said, best case scenario, it's a biohazard crew. Worst case scenario, these are chemists for a cartel who had loaded weapons and would have killed your ass on sight. So this was a list for you to go to sleep to. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. A special thanks to my incredible patrons who, you guys are single-handedly, making me capable of doing this now, because it seems YouTube is very vigilantly trying to demonetize any and everything that I could even dream about putting onto this channel. So thank you for what you're doing. My links are in the description should you want to become a patron. I highly recommend that you follow me on Twitch. Just type in Kyle and then Twitch. Or that you follow me on Twitter so that should anything happen to this channel, you'll have a way of getting new things that I put out. Love you, and I'll see you soon.